The last part of speech that we need to cover is prepositions, and I purposely left these to the end because this is where we are actually going to be starting our studies of grammar, and it's the one that I think is the easiest one to help us get an understanding of the rest of the parts of speech. So we looked at what we already know about past knowledge. I know students have studied prepositions before, just in recognizing them. But I always like to start off with a definition and some examples. So preposition, we said, is a word that shows a relationship between a noun and another word. And so we have a list of prepositions on the board in my classroom, and so we chose one, above, and I asked a student to make a sentence using the word above. And so we said the fan is above my head. And so if we were going to find the preposition, the preposition was above, and it shows a relationship between the fan and my head and where it's located. The ball was under the desk. It's under is the preposition. It's the word that's showing a relationship between the noun ball and where it's located, the desk, under the desk. So we just put a couple examples on our sheet just so that we knew them, but they actually got another reference sheet today that lists all of the prepositions they need to know. So about, in, over, with, without. And so under related terms, we had a couple of things. Students were a little surprised when I brought some math into class, but we came up with an equation that explains what a prepositional phrase looks like. If I wanted to write one, this is the formula I would follow. If I wanted to see if a prepositional phrase was actually a prepositional phrase, this is what it would have to include. It would have to start with a preposition and can be followed by modifiers, doesn't have to have modifiers, and this was our big fancy 7th grade word for describers, so adjectives and adverbs can be in the middle, and then it has to end with a noun. And the poster in my classroom has several prepositions that have a star next to them because those prepositions are sometimes used in other contexts. And so we said that if they don't have modifiers and a noun after them, then they're not used as prepositions. So for example, the word to can be used as an infinitive, to play. And play is a verb. So if we see the word to and it's followed by a verb, it's not a prepositional phrase. And then we had a special name for this noun, and it's called an object of a preposition. And I'm going to try to squeeze this in here. Object of preposition. We're going to talk about different jobs that nouns can do, and nouns can be subjects of a sentence. They can be direct objects. They can be indirect objects. So when we have a noun that's used in a prepositional phrase at the end, its special job is object of preposition, and we'll abbreviate that to the OP. And then the last term we talked about, that was it. I'm sorry, object of preposition. And so our hint was that these phrases can be taken out of a sentence and it still makes sense. So I gave the example of Mrs. Culleton went. That is a complete sentence. It has a subject and it has a verb. Mrs. Culleton is the subject, went is the verb. But when we look at, does it give us much information? Not really. So it's not a very good sentence. So we could add some prepositional phrases to show some extra description. After school, Mrs. Culleton went to the store on Main Street. So prepositional phrases we're going to be using a lot as a means of adding description to our writing and varying our sentence structure. So with this notes introduction, I then passed out a copy of the worksheet that has all the prepositions that students need to learn, and it is broken down into 3 separate lists. This particular list, students have a quiz on next Wednesday, September 11th, and they have to memorize these 24 words. And so we talked about some study strategies. And just looking at the idea of memorizing 24 words, it might seem a little bit intimidating. However, we talked about the fact that they were able to learn their alphabet, which is 26 letters, when they were in kindergarten. So by 7th grade, they should be very easily able to memorize 24 words and be able to just write them down on a piece of paper next week. If they spend 5 to 10 minutes a night, starting tonight and tomorrow and the next day and every day until they take the test, reviewing for a few minutes. So we then talked about, well, what can we do to make this a little bit easier? Our brain is not set up to help us remember big chunks of information. And so we thought, how could we break this list down a little bit more easily? And so students were able to break this list down into letters of the alphabet. So we said that there were, 10 words that begin with an A, and I am writing with my mouse, not my hand, so that's why it looks a little funky. We have 9 words that begin with a B, and we also notice that most of our B words, 8 of our 9 B words, begin with the letters BE. Before, behind, below, beneath. We see that we have 2 that are very similar, beside and besides, between, beyond, and then we have this last little one, by. And then we've got this category that I call the DEFs, the DEFs, and there are only 5 of them. So if we start the night by learning just our A's, and then maybe tomorrow add the A's and the B's together, and wrote them down on a piece of paper and checked our spelling, and continue doing this every day until next Wednesday, we would easily be able to memorize them. And so this was our study strategy. We called it chunking, breaking our list down into smaller groups. And then I told them that when they take their test next week, what they could do is, once they get their paper, they know that they have 10 that begin with an A. So go ahead and write 10 A's at the beginnings of 10 lines, so they know that if they're missing one, they know which letter it begins with. Same with the B's. They know that there are 9, so go ahead and write down B, 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 B 9 times, and then the DEF category. So they'll take a couple of practice quizzes before next Wednesday just to give them the practice, but we're going to employ this strategy for the next 2 preposition lists as well. And they have one this week, then one the following week, and the following week, just to start studying. So there should be some studying every night for the rest of September. Okay?